This is Stu Epperson from the Truth Talk podcast, connecting current events, pop culture, and theology, and we're so grateful for you that you've chosen the Truth Podcast Network. It's about to start in just a few seconds. Enjoy it, and please share it around with all your friends. Thanks for listening, and thanks for choosing the Truth Podcast Network.
This is the Truth Network. Welcome to Truth Talk Live.
All right, let's talk.
The truth is, I can't hide it, I can't hold it no more.
A daily program powered by the Truth Network,
This is kind of a great thing, and I'll tell you why.
where pop culture, current events, and theology all come together.
Speak
Your mind.
And now, here's today's Truth Talk Live host.
It is Missions Monday. How fun is that? And it's even more fun for me when I have a great friend that I don't get to spend as much time with as I like. His name is Andy Bowersox. And so if you know Andy, you know that he is with Energize Ministries, which is completely a pasture care kind of idea. And so you're saying, Robbie, how do you tie these things together? Well, here you go. Here's how Mission Monday works today. So your mission, if you choose to accept it, right, is to further the kingdom of God. I mean, that's what we all are doing. And one of the ways that God does that is through his pastors, which have a lot more of a role than you may understand. That there is more than preaching to it, a great deal more than preaching, because, you know, obviously, or maybe not obviously, Jesus is going to hold them responsible, right, for how they tended their flock. And that requires feeding, no doubt, but there's also some guiding. There's all sorts of interesting things that go into that role. And so you, me, everybody else that has a pastor out there, you know, how do you care for your pastor? That is one of your missions, right? You to care for this guy because he has a role. He's your friend, but he also needs your care. He needs your prayers. And Andy, you I have to tell the story, man.
Uh-oh. I don't know where we're starting today, but go
Well, let's
for
go to
it.
the beginning,
Go
right?
right to the
So
beginning.
I had to start to work for Truth Broadcasting, and we both have a very good friend. His name is Larry George. And Larry George, at the time, ran Siloam Missionary Homes. He's still very involved with it out there in Snow Camp, North Carolina. So it has everything to do with missions. And I'll tell you how this has to do with missions in my mind was we had a radio show that I helped produce, which was called A Place Missionaries Call Home. And Larry's a very visionary guy, and he comes to me, Robbie, I got this great idea. I want to do like a reality radio show of 3 missionaries that have been called to the mission field. And the first year, let's see who actually gets it done, who actually can raise their support and make it happen.
You remember what that show was called?
What was it called?
Do you remember? Because I tell this story a little differently than you, but
Oh, really?
you don't remember, do you?
I don't.
It was called The Journey.
Oh, it was called The Journey.
Yep.
You're right.
Radio reality. It was a pioneer of that idea at the time.
So anyway, and it sounded like a great idea, but then he went on and told me about these 3 different ministries. And, you know, the first one was a guy, as I recall, he was going to Africa with his wife. They're relatively newly married, and, you know, they had a call to the mission field, and they were going to go to Africa. And then there was another couple, as I recall, were they going to South America?
The other people were going to Europe, I believe, and he was a former Chick-fil-A either operator or manager or something.
Yeah.
But you're on the right track.
Yeah. And then he says, I've got this third guy. And his mission field is that he likes to take pastors out like
For adventure.
well, the way he did,
Recreation.
the
Oh,
way
okay,
it
let's hear
was
it directly.
recreation, but that wasn't how he described it. He goes, you know, he takes them out on jet skis and on 4-wheelers and stuff like that. And I'm going, and that's a missionary.
Yeah.
How?
Hey, I was the one doing it, and I thought, what in the world kind of ministry is this? Like, I know it was crazy. So go on with your story.
But anyway, he was convinced that this was a very, very, very needed and legitimate ministry. He was, and so I'm
he
like,
still is. So
oh yeah,
fortunately for both of us.
and I was convinced very shortly thereafter. But at the time, I was like, okay, let's see how this goes, you know. And so we take off on this, and every couple weeks, right? You guys would come in and we'd record your progress, how the journey was going towards actually getting on the mission field, which to an extent you were already doing it. You were
It was
trying
pretty
to
early on, but
yeah, you were raising support and all
you
sorts
know,
of things like everybody
I'm
was.
going to straighten this out a little bit.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I want you to be fully transparent here and also make the comment that I've heard many times. If you had to pick, like, you remember the yearbooks, least likely to succeed? I've heard the comment before. I believe your exact words were they don't stand a chance or something like that. So, listen, that's a great intro, actually, Robby, right? So I do lead in Energize Ministries. What you're talking about happened 14 years ago now. I don't know if you know it's been that long, but for 14 years. And at that time, this is what I knew, that God was asking me to spend my time one-on-one individually with pastors providing very unique forms of recreation and retreats. And it did include some of that crazy stuff. Go-karting, ATVs, jet ski, rock climbing trips, and full admission, if you're listening right now and you think that sounds ridiculous to go take pastors on these recreational retreats and think that's a ministry, believe me, I felt exactly the same way. There were years that I feel like, I mean, you've heard me say this before, like I am parading around like an absolute buffoon trying to convince people that it's important to be reinvested in the lives of your pastors, albeit at that time through very much recreationally based things. Now, our ministry has grown exponentially since then, and I personally understand why we started like that now, which I didn't then. It was crazy, admittedly, absolutely crazy. Just like Noah was probably ridiculed and thought he was insane for spending 100+ years building a boat, right? Like, you know how many times I think about that?
I'm with you.
I think about it all the time because God still asks people to do ridiculous things for reasons that we don't immediately understand. And sometimes we can go our whole life without understanding. Maybe that's a whole nother show. Let's stick with Energize Ministries today, okay? So today, what does it look like? We provide encouragement, refreshment, and still we do recreational retreats because that's where we started from. But you're right. At those times, I thought it was crazy. I didn't want to do it, but I couldn't not do it. Like, you know how when God asks you to do something, maybe you're not always 100% sure, right? Like, how many times have we talked about in our Southern Baptist sort of characterized upbringing, we're very careful to say, hey, God told me to go do this, or God told me to do that. Now, if you're the Pentecostal and you're listening, maybe you're more familiar and comfortable with that language. But for us, in my day, it would have been, hey, I feel like this is what God's asking me to do. And I've said this before, too, on one of your shows. I absolutely believe the closer you walk with the Lord, the more charismatic and Pentecostal you become, and you become more used to that language. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But
and your life epitophizes that, and it really does. And it's so cool to me how God turned it all back on me in so many different ways. So the question today is for you to call in at 866-34-TRUTH is how can you care for your pastor? Seriously, this is a real, I would love to know your thought. How can you care for your pastor? 866-34-TRUTH. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today we are having another Missions Monday, which I just love this show, and a different kind of mission. And it came upon me early on in my radio career that caring for pastors is a big time mission, and God showed me this through Andy Bowersox and Energize Ministries. But that's the question we're posing to you, and it'll all come around to how critical it is to the kingdom of God. How can you care for your pastor? Like, how do you do that? Or maybe you got a great idea. Andy needs it. I mean, he's still doing this kind of thing to this very.
We are still learning
this
day
minute.
after day.
And so we have Buskman in Ohio, and he has got some information for me. I'm always excited. Buskman, how are you doing today, man?
It is always good to hear your voice, Robby, when you're still, filling for Stu. And Andy, the answer to that, brother, and I bet Robby would back me up 100%. Dad jokes.
Dad jokes.
That's how we build up our pastors. Good dad jokes. Okay, Brother Andy?
Hey.
So I got one for you.
Oh, my
I
goodness.
got one for you.
Is it on Robbie's level, or are we like...
Oh, it is.
Well, the last couple ones, Brother Andy, Robbie has actually stumped me. And on my dadness, he has actually stumped me with the last couple. So I think I might stump him.
Lay it on us, bud. Let's hear it.
Okay, now, I'm going to tell you, it's kind of gross, but it's rated G.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm excited,
I want to say that
personally.
for all our Truth Talk Live.
All right.
I have to say that for Truth Talk Live listeners. Okay, here we go. Why? Let's see. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I got to get focused here. What is the difference between boogers and broccoli?
Boogers and broccoli. Sounds tasty.
That's exactly what kids say, too. They won't eat broccoli.
I won't eat broccoli. That's the difference? Ah, I knew it.
That's the difference. Kids won't eat broccoli because the boogers are tastier.
Oh, there you have it. And that, fortunately, folks are not quite ready for dinner, but they might be here. They might be here shortly. So I got one, Rooster, if you got me started, you can't help it.
Boy.
I got one that I
go.
heard. I don't know if you've heard this, but I've got this new nickname that people are calling me Rooster.
Rooster, okay?
You know why? Because.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Because.
Hey, but brothers, on the dad level, that was a level 9 dad level. Out of 10 dads, we give Brother Robbie a 9 dad for that dad joke.
There you
Congratulations, Brother Robbie.
All right, Mr. Brustman,
yeah.
I have a question for you now. How often do you share dad jokes with your pastor?
I'm in between churches right now, but all the pastors right now, I'm sharing it with you. Hopefully, you'll be my pastor.
Okay, well, when you get settled, I'm sure he would appreciate that. We often talk about unencumbered conversation, right? Enjoying time with your
Right.
pastor where you don't want anything from him. You're just there to pour and refill his pitcher. So if dad jokes is your thing, carry him with you when you find your new one.
Yeah, because
Here's my Bible basis for it, my brothers.
Oh, good.
Proverbs-
Bible basis for dad jokes. I need this. Proverbs.
Yes. Proverbs 15:13. 15:13 of the Proverbs.
Okay. Lay it on us.
That's our Father's. It says, a merry heart raises a countenance.
There you go.
But weariness crushes the bones.
I agree every bit of it. A merry heart raises the countenance. Good.
And so,
Yep. So
just so you'll know, Busman, I happen to be a pastor amongst my many other good things God gives me to do. So, you raise on every time that you share one of these, you improve my countenance. So you're reaching one
brother.
pastor if nobody else. So,
thanks, brother.
Thank
Man, I
you.
love you, Brother Robbie. Thank you, Pastor Robbie. Yeah. I'm glad I raised your countenance.
You did.
Okay, that's
God
all
bless
I got
you.
for today, guys.
Thank you, sir. God bless.
All right. Love
Bye-bye.
you guys. Talk to you later.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye-bye. All right. I know you're thinking, I have another plan. I love Busman. I mean, I love, people that take part in this. It's like taking part in church, right? Like, ask not what your church can do for you, but what you can do for your church. Well, the same thing. Ask not what Truth Talk Live can do for you, but what you can do to Truth Talk Live. Well, what you got to do is dial 866-348-7884, because that thing that you've been doing for your pastor, I don't know what that may be, by spending unencumbered time, taking to a football game. I don't know what it is, but I would love to know it, because everybody listening can be encouraged by that. And just think there's a pastor out there that could really use it. So 866-348-7884, Andy.
Yeah, give us your stories, and if you have questions about how to do it. Robbie, I don't know if you remember this, but one of those, it might have even been the very first show when we were talking about those journey days, right? And how is God moving you from what we would have said marketplace ministry into full-time Christian service? And if you remember, after that first one or early on, I remember saying, Robbie, like, why would anybody listen to this because this is just a train wreck. Like, I don't think it went well. I know I don't sound that good on the radio. Like, I feel like maybe I've gotten a little better since then. But, I remember being nervous about it. And you said something to me. I don't know if you remember this or not, but you said, Andy, the way God uses this is maybe there's somebody up in Canada listening to what you're doing for pastors. And that guy's going to go quail hunting that weekend. And maybe he just thinks, you know what, I should invite my pastor to come along. And it just, that one little thing might be something that pastor needs. Well, when you said it, I sort of shrugged it off. But I drove out this parking lot, and clear as day, when I hit the ditch between Providence Lane over here and whatever that other road, North Point, I guess, I felt like the Lord tapping me on the shoulder and saying, Andy, you have no idea why I've asked you to do this. But I want you to encourage a nation of believers on how they can actively reinvest in the lives of their pastors. That's been almost 14 years ago, and I think about it every single week. Like, I can't tell you every day, but every single week I think about the comment that you made and how the tangible, practical things that we can do to lift up the spirits, to lift up the countenance, like our man just said of our pastors, and why it matters so much.
Yeah. You've got the burnout statistics and all this thing. And COVID, man, it took a horrible blow on so many pastors that felt, like, do I mask or not? Every direction they went, they felt like they were under attack. And some of those guys are still reeling from that.
I would say more than you can possibly imagine, right? Here there's the I don't want to say the key, right? But what I have learned of the underlying, like, the foundation of our ministry exists because there's something going on in your pastor's life that you know nothing about. We ought to investigate that some more, because everybody has problems under the surface, right? We have created this environment where our pastors cannot be transparent. They're scared to be transparent. They're scared of what you're going to think, because so many people want them to be living lives of perfection. Their families and kids too.
Well, you've got to call us 866-348-7884. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. And today's topic, amazing. It really is. Like, here's the question. It's Missions Monday, but part of that mission is, how can you care? Like, literally care for your pastor. And that, if you think about it, and Andy thinks about it all the time, but that could be done through prayer, right? And that could be done by an email. Like, man, I've been following your series, and I just got to tell you where that lit up my world. Or, I don't know how, God puts it on your heart, but as one of the things that always triggers things for me, and I know it does for you, Andy, is you start praying about something and God gives you something to do.
Yeah. I love the fact that we're talking about this, Robby. And I want to get to the real, like, the practical ways too, right? But I want to set the stage just a little bit more on why this is so important. And I want to do it by just telling a couple stories, okay? I don't know what it's been, 8 or 9 years ago, 10 years ago now maybe, my senior pastor unfortunately took his own life. It was a shock throughout our community. I mean, we had a vibrant church going, ministries flourishing, people coming to know the Lord, people being discipled through small groups. I mean, it was wide open and seemingly fantastic at every turn. And all of a sudden, this rattles the community. Front page of the papers. I mean, it's shocking is the most understated way I can say it. And after that happened, and people started to realize that there were some issues behind the scenes, if I'd have heard one time, I heard 1,000 probably, this comment in the foyer that, if we had only known this was going on, then here's how we could have helped. And the reality of that is absolute hogwash, right? Like, it's a rough term, I know, but the thing is, if people would have known, hey, this guy was abusing alcohol or having other problems, they don't rush in to help. That's not the natural human psyche, right? You know what it is, hey, did you hear this, that the pastor was doing this? Or I heard this about the pastor. Can you believe that happened? That's terrible, right? It's not a heart to help. It's a heart of spreading gossip and the rumor mills. And we love to be the bearer of bad news. And it's the same thing happens week after week. How many times have we see our pastor's children in the foyer that are carrying on? Or, I heard somebody the other day say, those kids are the Tasmanian devils, or as they get older, this pastor's daughter has a 14-year-old daughter, and maybe she's wearing something that's, heaven forbid, it's 2 inches above her knee or wherever. And all we want to do is criticize, right? I remember being at a church when the offering parade is being passed, and I was sitting in the front row. I was getting ready to share about our ministry at this church, and in the front row, I was sitting there. The pastor's wife was there. The kids were there, and as they're passing the offering plate, I can literally feel the eyeballs of everyone else in the back looking to see what the pastor's kids are putting in the offering plate. Like it's a never-ending criticism, and it's not intentional. Listen, I've probably done it many times myself, right? I've got something negative to say. So my point in all of that is we are so apt to fill our churches with criticism, whether it's music, lighting, sound,
I got a really cool to go along with what you're saying.
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay, so if you've ever seen the original movie Shrek, right? And if you've seen this scene, it's hilarious, where he rescues Fiona. Now he's an ogre, and she looks beautiful, okay? But actually, if you know the story, she too is an ogre. I mean, that's part of what she is. Well, when he rescues her, she says, you need to take off your helmet, because you know how it goes. A princess is beset by a dragon, and she's rescued by Prince Charming, and then they share true love's first kiss. Well, and he says, I can't take off my helmet because I got helmet hair. It's a great line. And then she orders him to take off the helmet, and when he takes off the helmet, he gives her this real funny look, and she goes, you're an ogre, right?
Yeah.
And of course, that's her immediate comment. Why? Because she wanted him to be Prince Charming. Well, see, whenever your pastor takes off his mask, and I'm one of them, just picture Robbie taking his mask off and take a good look. I'm an ogre. I am. But guess what? So are you, Fiona. I mean, right. After dark, you turn into an ogre too. So we know how the scheme goes, but the deal is we expect our pastors actually to be Jesus.
Okay, so totally right, okay? And your pastor is not Jesus. He's a human being.
He's an ogre.
That has the exact same problems that you do. He has been given a calling, an assignment, and an anointing by the Lord to preach and teach the gospel. However, he's still a human being. That here's the reality, right? When you see, like in our church, when all these wonderful things were happening, what you should be expecting is that the enemy is working as equally hard to destroy those things. So how many times have you said on your shows, ministry is messy? It is messy. And we need to understand that. And we need to be bathing our pastors and our teachers with care and prayer support. In our case, we specialize in preventive care and prayer, right? Like I've made this comment before. How many of us would want to invest our money, our funds into a company that the CEO feels discouraged, fights with isolation and depression-related issues? We don't want that, right? We want that guy to be vibrant, to be pushing the bottom lines, because it affects all of us. Well, in ministry, it's the same thing. Healthy leadership is important, not through healthy ministry, but ultimately in the fulfillment of the Great Commission. And in every single act of Christian service that happens across town or across the globe, it's important to have healthy, vibrant leadership. And they're being attacked left and right. The Bible tells us the enemy prowls around like a roaring lion. You know who he's after the most? He's after the leadership, because it's a war. It's a battlefield. We were talking about battle before. So that's all of that stuff. I never understood it personally. When God started asking me to spend my time encouraging pastors one-on-one, I never even thought about that stuff, right? Because all I see is like everybody else, from 9 to 12, they're up there on Sunday morning, maybe teaching a Sunday school class, maybe making a few hospital visits. You don't have any idea that he just got off the phone with the credit card company because they're, mad that he ran up some bogus charge and somebody's hacked him and his kids were in a car accident and they're fighting about the curfew and, it's so much stuff going on. And you mentioned the COVID, right? You have no idea that he just came out of a 2-hour meeting trying to convince somebody in that day that they should have had masks on, and he's headed into the next 2-hour meeting trying to convince the next guy that they shouldn't be wearing the mask because it's like people are people. There's opinions going 1,000 miles an hour. And, I used to work for this guy that said, Andy, when you have one employee, you have one problem. When you have 2 employees, you have 100 problems, and it goes up exponentially from there. It's very similar to the church. Everybody's got something to say. So those are the issues. I know we're going to address how we're going to combat that, actually make a difference, but they're setting the stage for you.
Well, here's something I heard at the NRB. I wrote it down in my quotisms. I'm never going to forget it. You know how God rewards good work?
With more work.
Correct. You've heard it.
I do know that.
And that's what's happened, right? The pastor's done some good work, and so he's now got more work. And of course, as the game steps up, right, the more he's been given, the more is required. And so really cool from my standpoint. Here's somebody stand back from the sidelines looking. I know he raised up your ministry to raise up these pastoral care teams.
Pastor care reps. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah. And so I've been on the beholding, in other words, just to be too terribly transparent, but my family went through a real crisis, a huge one. Was it 7 years ago? I don't know, 8 years ago. And I don't have any idea how Andy got word of it, but all of a sudden here comes his call. Right? I'll never, ever, ever forget it because I was and it was just simple. Robby, what can I do for you? Well, he had no idea. I had a horrible situation with a car that was stuck somewhere. I needed something for the Jesus Labor Love, and they were driving me crazy. I got to get this done. I said, Andy, could you just move a car? Do you remember that?
Yep.
Well, nobody knows, man.
That's what we talk about, practical, tangible thing. It makes such a difference.
Right, because I was up against it. And I was up against it in so many different ways. And here's this problem sitting there. And it was just like, man, Andy, and you did it without a hesitation. It was just like, man. And so it's like the Jesus Labor Love, right? That this lady comes and she's like, you got to fix my air conditioner. I've been driving around the summer for 2 years in the heat because I got no money and my husband used to fix everything. And she's a widow. And Jerry goes out there and goes, well, you see that snowflake right there on the dash? You just push that, right? And the air comes on. Well, often being part of the pastor's care team is just pushing the snowflake, man. It's so simple and easy, but just making yourself available to be there to move that car.
Yeah, those simple little things like guarding your pastor's time, when they're on vacation, it should be a policy that we're not going to bug the pastor. I've heard it 100 times from pastors' kids that they never get to finish the vacation. They can be on the beach, and all of a sudden, Dad gets a call, and he's got to run. And it creates problems and problems and problems down the road. So that's a simple one. Protect their time, but we'll get more.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live today. So excited to have with me Andy Bowersox with Energize Ministries. And the question is, how can you or how have you cared for your pastor? And you got ideas. We would love to hear them. 866-348-7884. We really would. 866-348-7884. I can't tell you the number of times that your call has literally made my day, and I've thought about it all the way home. Like, God is raising up people all over to do things that just blow my mind. And he just never ceases to amaze me. And that's what you could do by calling us and amaze an entire audience with what God did, or you got a chance to take part in. 866-348-7884. So Andy, I love this. It's a pastor care
Pastor Care Rep, new program for us this year.
Okay.
So, if you've been listening to the show, you've been talking about us and why it's important to care for your pastor and how it ultimately affects the kingdom. And, there's a whole host of people, you may be one of them, that feels like, you know what, I'm not called to be an evangelist. I'm not called to smuggle Bibles into China or wherever. But you can be that voice of encouragement by the simple things that you said, Robbie. Baking a plate of cookies. Let me just lay out a few tangible, practical things, okay? One is a handwritten thank you note on how something that your pastor said, even this past week, impacted your life or how it connected with you. Our ministry hears from pastors all the time that have no idea if they're really connecting. I mean, it's part of the spiritual battle, right? They can spend a week or two preparing a message, doing exactly what they feel like, and I hear this comment. Sometimes it just seems like it falls on deaf ears because you don't know what people are really thinking.
Well, here's what you do here, and because I do it.
True, you're there now.
Is the moment you quit? Well, if you're on the radio, or it doesn't matter to me whether I'm on the radio or I'm speaking at an event, or I just gave a message. Satan will have your ear all the way home on you blew this. You didn't even get to that.
Right.
You did, he knows. And so what you will hear, I can absolutely guarantee your pastor is hearing all the things he did not say or all the things he did not get across the way he wanted to.
So case in point, when that happens to you, how important is it when you get home and you get next day you open the mail or you get a text. Text is a great way to do it now too, or an email even. Said, you know what, Pastor, when you were talking about this specific thing, about how that lady was
I can just tell
Joseph
you,
and here's how it impacted. Right.
We did a boot camp this entrenchment at our church, and one of the good guys, he came up on the podium, up there after the service, and he said, Robbie, I got to tell you, man, I got 2 guys I just got to send to the next entrenchment, and I rode home on wings, right? That was a simple little thing. But it made all the difference in the world that what we had done, it impacted him to the point that he wanted to get more people involved in it, right?
Okay, so that's one simple, and here I'm just throwing a little challenge out there right now. There is probably somebody riding down the road in their SUV or their minivan or their car or wherever that is thinking right now, perhaps God's tapping me on the shoulder to be that voice of encouragement. Act on it. Right now, I will tell you from experience, obedience in those subtle little moments. If you're sensing right now that maybe God is tapping you on the shoulder to be that voice of encouragement, and you obey, obedience absolutely unlocks the miracles of God in our lives, little or big, over and over and over. God moves after our obedience. It happens over and over and over. So those little things. Okay, maybe that's you. Maybe that's not you. Maybe you're trying to think of something else, okay? You like to make cookies and muffins. If somebody brings me a blueberry muffin, everybody in my office knows it's going to be a good day if somebody brings me, no matter what else is happening. I'm a blueberry muffin fanatic, right? But it's also more than that. And so if you're listening to here and you're saying, hey, we want to know how we can get involved. We understand that healthy leadership helps our church, helps our community, helps our ministry, and people come to know and grow in the Lord. Come to our website. It's energizeministries.com and look up the Pastor Care, we call it PCR program. We would love to train you, to engage you, to be that voice of encouragement in your own church. We realize, there's hundreds of thousands of churches, good Bible teaching, preaching churches across our nation. We can't possibly have a presence in one of those unless one of the things that happened in this studio was God calling us to raise an army of believers that are committed to reinvesting in the lives of their own leadership. We absolutely believe that we will see the tide shift from where the criticism is replaced with care, and we specialize in preventive care and prayer. That's why it matters. So become a prayer warrior for your pastor. Spread the word about that. Serve. What was your little jingle you gave me a minute ago? The movie jingle?
Oh, I love it. Life is so unnerving for a servant who's not serving. It's from Beauty and the Beast. Yes.
From Beauty and the Beast. Life is so unnerving for a servant that is not serving. You want to hear a funny story? a few years ago, most bigger churches right now, they have a parking committee, right?
Oh, yeah?
Oh, and it drives me up the wall that we can't just drive in somewhere and park where we want to. Okay, if you go to one of these bigger churches, you know what I'm talking about. There's 3 or 4 guys waving this way, that way. We never used to have that problem. We can just park where we want to. Well, anyway, I was irritated about this. I drove in, guys waving the baton one way, and other one's waving the other way, and I finally, the heck with it. I'm going to go this way. This is where I want to go, and I parked. And I said something to the guy later on. I'm like, you guys need to work on this parking team. He hands me the baton, and he says, here you go. If you can do better, come on out and do it. And I felt so convicted because, look, I'm supposed to be the Energizer bunny, the one that's out there encouraging. And here I am criticizing people that probably doing the best they can do, right? And I'm like, got to find better people. And they're like, well, here you go. Come pick up the mantle.
Here's the shocker, Andy. You're an ogre.
Don't give me that ogre stuff over there. This isn't a movie scene we're working on here.
The
right
beauty
now.
thing of the ogre is, you see, when we get the idea that what God designed the world, that we need Jesus, we need God, we need the Holy Spirit, and so when that person that we're putting all this reliance on turns out to be an ogre, that's a check engine light flashing on your dashboard. Seek Jesus, and He will tell you to help that guy. Like, I mean, literally come in there like, man, you need more firepower, whatever, how can I help you? And then you do that, but I understand, and I do understand that I'm broken. But one of the best things that you'd been talking about in my marriage was when my wife figured out that I was an ogre. For a long time, she thought I was Prince Charming. And, once the helmet came off and she saw, man, you're an ogre. You weren't supposed to be it. I love it. She says that. You weren't supposed to be an ogre. Well, I'm
Guess
sorry.
what?
Yeah.
We all have scars. We all have imperfections. We live in an imperfect society. I don't know if you remember, Robby, early on, our ministry had a run-in with a very well-known pastor, and I wasn't happy about it. I remember going home and saying, like, God, why would you use somebody like that? Like, why would you bless somebody with this great ministry? Because this guy was mad. He was angry at us. And I remember the Lord, same familiar tap. You know what? Andy, I have no choice but to use flawed and sinful people to accomplish my work. That has become one of the boldest mantras of our ministry, because we're all there. Right?
I think that's worth writing down. I have no choice but to use flawed and sinful
people
and
to
broken
accomplish my work. And it's so true. That's all He's got. We're it. The ogres, or whatever you want to call us. We're the A team, right? And like the B team looks even worse. So remember that. Remember that about your pastor, right? I mean, he is dealing with stuff that if somebody, Toby Mac or somebody has that famous saying that everybody's fighting a battle you know nothing about. It's never more true than in the life of somebody. Maybe it's a ministry leader, maybe it's your pastor, but somebody that is working to introduce others to Christ, to lead them closer to Christ. They are under attack that you can't possibly imagine the pressure and the manifestations of it unless you're there. So you want to learn more about it, like, we'd love to talk to you. It's energizeministries.com. We would love to have you just send an email. Say, hey, I'm interested in this.
And not to mention that it's a virtual plethora of resources for your pastor. Like, you guys have all sorts of events. You have retreat centers. In other words, when you become this prayer rep, you're going to have, like, you
get
can
access to our whole arsenal of what we offer, and like you said, a lot of special events. We do have an amazing retreat center up in Virginia that's dedicated exclusively to kingdom leadership, predominantly pastors. That's a whole amazing story in and of itself. But look, we are really leading the charge. There's a whole ton of ministries that exist after there's been crisis, after there's been a burnout or a failure of some sort. In our case, we're not trying to put them out of business, because they're going to be there, right? But how much more effective would all of this stuff be if we could avoid the black eyes, if we could avoid it when it gets that bad? Let's work on the preventive side. What does preventive care and prayer support look like in your church? We can show you. We want to help you with it. We want you to get involved. So please,
Yeah, and
check
what
us
they
out.
have, is experience, right? You guys have been doing this for 14 years now, and you've run up against, some of the things that, why reinvent the wheel? You want to get link arms with other Christians, right? We all think that we're in this alone. We're not.
We all have different gifts. You're totally right about that. And your gift, maybe it's mowing the grass, maybe it's fixing the car, like you said. Maybe you got a tow dolly, and your pastor's like, "Had it happen to me before? Pastor's daughter's car broke down." Volunteer to go pick it. There's so many things. We'd love to connect with you. It's EnergizeMinistries.com. Robby, thank you for having me on here. I love
Always
coming.
a blast.
Love hanging out with you. We should do it more often.
We will. Thank you for hanging out with us. We appreciate our listeners so much. And all you do for the Truth Network. You got a whole bunch of Truth Talk Live coming this week at you. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Truth Talk.